Okay, so today we're jumping into Psalm 7. And listen, you gotta forget everything you think you know about old dusty prayers. This thing, it's more like a raw legal drama, you know? A powerful monologue from someone who's been pushed right to the very edge. And what's so cool about this psalm is the journey it takes you on. I mean, it kicks off in this place of just absolute terror, life or death stuff. But somehow, by the end, the speaker lands in this place of total confidence and praise. So the big question is, right? How in the world do they get from point A to point B? Well, that's exactly the story we're going to follow. So here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start with that initial plea for refuge, then get into this really bold oath of innocence. After that, there's a call for divine justice. Then we'll look at God as both a shield and a judge, see how evil kind of implodes on itself, and finally, wrap up with that big shift from total peril to praise. All right, let's get right into it. Part 1, a plea for refuge. And we're not easing in here, folks. This starts at the absolute peak of desperation. This is the sound of someone who believes their life is literally on the line. I mean, really think about that for a second. What do you do when you feel like you're being hunted? Not just, someone doesn't like you. We're talking about feeling like prey. That is the exact mindset we're dropped into right at the beginning. And man, this verse just lays out the stakes perfectly. The imagery it's brutal, it's primal. He says they'll tear me apart like a lion. This isn't some metaphor for a tough week at work, right? This is the raw terror of being ripped to pieces by a predator, totally alone, with no one coming to the rescue. The danger feels so immediate, so deadly. So, okay, you're being hunted by a lion. How do you respond? Well, here's where it gets really interesting. The psalmist doesn't just, beg for mercy. Nope. They actually stand their ground and make this incredibly bold, almost legalistic declaration of their own innocence. Yeah, this is way more than just saying, I didn't do it. It's like a formal oath, a conditional bet. The speaker is so confident they're in the right that they're basically putting their own life on the line. They're telling God, look, if I'm actually guilty of what they say I am, then fine, let them get me. I deserve it. And you can see the logic laid out so clearly, like a 3-step argument. Step 1 is the accusation. If there's guilt on my hands. Step 2, the specific condition. If I've wronged someone who was my ally. And then bam, step 3, the consequence. Then let my enemy hunt me down and destroy me. It's about as powerful a statement of innocence as you can possibly make. And right here, we get a major pivot. This is a huge turning point in the psalm. The speaker goes from this very personal crisis, this save me, to a much bigger, almost universal demand. They're not just asking for personal rescue anymore. They're calling for cosmic justice. And just listen to the tone here. Arise, Lord, in your anger. Awake, my God, decree justice. This is not a quiet, timid little prayer, is it? It's a summons. It's a command. The speaker is calling the judge into the courtroom, telling him to take his seat and bring down the gavel. It feels less like a plea and more like a demand for a righteous king to do something. And look at how the whole thing just expands. It's not about my enemies anymore. Now the plea is for a universal judgment. He's asking God to judge all peoples, to end all violence, and to protect the righteous everywhere. It's like his own personal suffering lit a fire, and now he's calling for a worldwide restoration of order and justice. So this brings us to 2 really powerful and kind of contrasting ideas about God in this text. We see this fascinating duality of divine power. Okay, so on one side, you've got God as a shield, a protector. That's a defensive image, right? It's about safety, about refuge for the innocent. But then on the other side, you've got this warrior judge. This God is sharpening his sword, bending his bow, getting his weapons ready. And the point the psalm seems to be making is that you can't have one without the other. To truly be a shield for the innocent, you also have to be a warrior against wickedness. And this leads to what is, for me, one of the most brilliant ideas in the entire psalm. It's this concept that evil doesn't just get defeated by some outside force. No, the argument here is that wickedness is fundamentally self-destructive. It contains the seeds of its own collapse. We have a term for this, right? Poetic justice. It's when a character's downfall is ironically and fittingly tied to their own actions. And what we're about to see is a perfect textbook example of this. The bad guys don't just lose, they get caught in their own traps. So the whole thing starts with this wild metaphor. It says the wicked person is pregnant with evil. Think about that. Evil isn't just something you do, it's something you conceive, you carry, and you give birth to. In a way, they're the parent of their own downfall. Okay, so after conceiving this trouble, what do? They get to work building a trap. The psalm says they dig a hole, they scoop it out. They're being very deliberate, very purposeful, right? They're setting this trap for somebody else. And then comes the punchline, the great ironic reversal. They fall right into the very pit they just finished digging. The trouble they were pregnant with, it recoils on them. It's like this perfect closed system. The evil they put out into the world just comes right back and gets them. It's not random chance. It's a direct result of their own scheme. All right, so we've been through the terror, the courtroom-style defense, the call for cosmic justice, and now we finally get to the resolution. And this last verse is just, wow. Especially when you put it side by side with the first one. Remember that frantic cry about being torn apart by a lion? Well, that is completely transformed into this confident, powerful song of praise. And notice, the speaker isn't just hoping things will be okay. They are certain. Their confidence isn't based on their situation getting better, but on their deep conviction in how righteousness and justice actually work. And that really leaves us with something to chew on, doesn't it? In a world that often feels chaotic and unjust, where does real confidence come from? This ancient poem suggests it doesn't come from a lack of danger, but from a profound belief in a moral order to the universe. And that poses a question that's just as relevant today. When you're faced with what feels like total chaos, where do you find the confidence that, in the end, justice will prevail?